What's going on, guys? Andrew here from Drew Reviews. And today, if you've got an appetite for B movies, this movie should be a gourmet smorgasbord for you. Today, we talk about 1995's Screamers. All right, welcome back. Like many of you who have continued watching, I too am a B movie aficionado, and I just absolutely love Screamers. Well, most of it anyway. We'll get into that a little bit later. Screamers is a 1995 film. In some places in the US, it got released in 96. It was kind of lucky it had a theatrical release to begin with, but which is kind of odd to say because this was a $20 million movie. And of course, it stars Peter Weller, best known for RoboCop and Buckaroo Banzai. I also like him a lot in Shakedown and several other movies, Naked Lunch. Jennifer Rubin is in this thing. She's best known from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. She's Taryn. She's beautiful and she's bad. Uh, Jeez. So our story begins, I believe it was in the year 2078. So this group called the New Economic Bloc has discovered this uh, mineral called beryllium that they're mining, and it's going to solve the world's energy crisis. But the only problem is this beryllium down in these mines ends up, causing all this radiation. So you got people dying, and so because of working conditions and everything, the new economic bloc from this point forward, called the NEB, ends up splitting. There's the NEB and the Alliance, and they end up having this like 20-year-long war. Our main character, Commander Hendrickson, played by the great Peter Weller, just absolutely love him in just about everything I've seen him in. He's part of this resistance force in the Alliance on Sirius 6B, and there's very few of them left. They're down in this bunker. It's him and his second in command, Chuck, and a few others, and they're trying to hold down their part of the war against the NEB, who they haven't seen actually in like 6 months as we come into the movie. And at the very beginning of the movie, you have this NEB soldier coming up over this sand dune, and he has this message for Commander Hendrickson. But of course, he ends up getting attacked by these screamers. So basically, the Alliance developed these screamers, and they're these self-replicating robots. And so there's this factory underground that even Commander Hendrickson hasn't seen. They just, as he says in the movie, they made the first ones and they hit the button and they ran. Shut the place up. So they don't know what's going on down there. But these screamers, basically, they remind me of the huge worms in Tremors. The way they go through the sand and the sand rises up. Kind of also reminds me of Freddy's Claw in that beach scene in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, where it's kicking up sand. But these things, they're these autonomous swords, they call them. They're these little robots, and this soldier ends up getting taken out by this thing. His arm gets cut off, his leg gets cut off, and gets killed. And the only way that the Alliance can get around their own screamers and walk about on the surface is these screamers track a heartbeat. So they have these things called tabs on their wrists. And so it throws the signal of their heartbeat out of phase and flatlines it. So the NEBs don't have this. They do, and they can walk about. So this thing, of course, just kills this soldier. They get the message back, and it's for peace talks for the NEBs, because like Hendrickson's been at war for 10 years on this planet. They rarely get rations and supplies from back home. And so they're down in this bunker like broke dick dogs, and so they're ready for this war to end. And so they're talking this over, Hendrickson and his buddy Chuck. Could this really be the end of the war? And should we pursue this peace talks, or is this all a trick to get us over there and kill us? And so that's kind of how the movie starts off. And then in one of the next scenes, they actually get a hologram from Earth, and it's Hendrickson's superior. And he's telling them that there are peace talks underway, and that this might be the end that they're looking for. And so they're convinced they need to go to NEB headquarters. But that night, there's a shuttle crash right outside their bunker. And so there's this huge explosion, and there's only one soldier left alive, this guy named Private Jefferson. They call him Ace. He can shoot the dots off of a dice, according to him. And Hendrickson's questioning him about what they were doing, going through space over them, because they have this nuclear reactor. And of course, he's telling them they're going to fight on Triton 4 because there's this new outbreak, with beryllium and the NEB and everything, and they were going to wipe them out totally. And of course, Hendrickson's like, no, we're having peace talks and everything. And Jefferson's like, beg your pardon, sir, but the high-ranking official he's been talking to in that hologram has actually been dead for 2 years, and they've got radiation, and so the transmission hadn't gone through. So Hendrickson feels like they've been left for dead out there. He actually has this great interaction with Chuck, and he's like, "Look around, man. We've been beached. They don't care about us." And so he takes Jefferson, since he's so willing to get his butt blown off, over to the NEB headquarters. And to make a long story short, they go on this trip, across this wasted land, and they're going to the NEB headquarters. Along the way, they meet this kid named David. It's kind of weird. It's this kid with a teddy bear all by himself in this frozen wasteland. So they go to the NEB headquarters, and of course, the NEBs know what David is right away. And one of the guys shoots him with this huge gun. Of course, the kid flies back, and they're like, "We're under attack, and what's going on?" And they look, and David is actually a screamer. He's got a hole in his chest. He's got wires and electronics and everything. And so they have a talk with the NEBs, and so they find out that, this David was a Type 3 screamer. And so now these screamers are beyond just little robots with blades that can kill people by registering their heartbeat and everything. Now they actually look like people. So Hendrickson and Jefferson kind of get in with the Nebs, and they meet Jennifer Rubin's character, who's like this black market dealer. She's got all kinds of alcohol and illegal guns and everything. And Hendrickson wants him to take her to Neb headquarters so he can meet with this, I believe his name was Cooper. And they're like, no, man, these Davids, these Type 3s, they destroyed everything. But Hendrickson wants to see it. So they take him in, and of course, everyone's been slaughtered. There's blood everywhere. This whole army of these Davids, these little kids that, they got these grotesque faces, and they come after you, with blades and everything. They're running for their lives, and they end up getting out of the NEB headquarters, out of the NEB bunker, and they head back toward Alliance. And when they get there, his buddy Chuck won't let him in. And slowly this gate races up, and it's full of Davids. They had let them into their compound, and there's just thousands of these things coming out. And luckily, Jefferson had stolen this little mini nuke. And so there's this whole thing, where they blow up the compound. And so now there's nowhere to go. At the end of the movie, there's just Jennifer Rubin and Peter Weller's character. There's no place to go, but he does have a way to get off the planet. There's this, little bunker that actually has a rocket ship in it that only takes his handprint. And so they go down there. And that's where this movie kind of goes south for me. I'll talk about that later when I get to my dislikes. So as far as things I like, the world building in this movie is spectacular. Of course, they're in the province of Quebec, so there's these dunes everywhere, but it's also like Frozen. So it makes all kinds of sense that you would have this apocalyptic desert wasteland, but there would be snow and ice everywhere where the sun couldn't get through. And one of the things they do to help the world building, I talked about this in one of my Ask Drews, is the matte paintings in this movie are spectacular. I just like to pause them, when there's a cool scene like that. There's like 5 or 6 different matte paintings that just help establish this world, and they fit right in. Like, there's some frozen wasteland stuff with the NEB headquarters, and then above the Alliance headquarters, there's some, just burnt out ruins that they've put up there. There's some really cool scenes at sunset, where they're up on this cliff. There's just whoever did the matte paintings for this movie, I didn't look at the credits, was just amazing. And if I was ever going to do a movie and needed a matte painting, I would definitely hire them. And of course, this thing being shot in Montreal, the NEB command was actually shot at the Olympic Stadium where the Expos used to play. And I really like that scene. They've got everything set up on the concourse, all the command modules and everything. And it's shot from underneath, so you see the blue roof that thing had. And I always love the color of the roof of Olympic Stadium. It's that electric blue, which is like my favorite color. And I think that looks really, space aged for a movie like this. And I really like that attention to detail. And so whoever was their locations manager did a really good job figuring out to shoot there. The acting in this movie is pretty good for the most part. I'll get into that a little later. Peter Weller, of course, he could read the phone book and he would be amazing in a movie. Andy Lauer, who plays Jefferson, is pretty good. I like the guy who plays Chuck. He plays him as a good guy in the beginning and kind of a bad guy at the end. He's really good at both. The boy who plays David, the machine with the teddy bear, he has this boyish innocence to him, but he also has this side to him where you can tell that something's not right. Something's just a little bit off about him. And so that is played very well by a child actor. The score to this movie is pretty good. It never took me out of the movie. Actually, the main theme that you see in the beginning after that text scroll is really good. And, I'd put it up there with like Pitch Black or something like that as far as like space themes. And this story is an adaptation of a Philip K. Dick novel called Second Variety. And for the most part, I like the story. It gets really convoluted at the end, which is going to drop the rating quite a bit. But Philip K. Dick, was about what is human and what is not. I talked about that, with Total Recall. And now they're making screamers that look like people and who is a screamer and who isn't. And the whole deal with who's human and who is not, it's great because they figured out what the Type 1 screamer is. They figured out what the Type 3 screamer is, but they don't know what the Type 2 screamer is. And Becker tells them it's this soldier who lays on his stomach yelling, "Help me, help me." And when you come help him, he kills you. And of course, that scene's paid off whenever they hit that mini nuke. Becker's character, he's laying on his stomach, and he's saying, "Help me, help me," and Jefferson goes ahead and helps him, and he kills Jefferson. And that is a great reveal. The movie should have ended shortly after that, with him getting off the planet. But that whole thing with Becker and the what is the Type 2 was a great reveal in this movie. Now, as far as things I didn't like, so I like this movie all the way up until the NEB part and the second act of the movie. You've got these characters. Ross, he's got these nervous tics and he keeps saying, "Get off my back." He doesn't bother me as much. You kind of need that character to be so traumatized in something like this. But it's the character of Becker, played by Roy Dupuis. He's a French Canadian actor. I believe that's probably how you say that name. Yeah, I'm from the Midwest, so I have no idea. But anyway, his character is so over the top. It's almost like he's channeling Snake Plissken, played by Kurt Russell, but taking it up to here, that it takes me out of the movie. Everything's done in a gravelly voice like this. And at one point, he licks his blade that he keeps sharpening, and it's just, dude, the director should have seen him and been like, "That is exactly what I don't want. Don't do that." Sir, if you're listening to this, I like the character, but I don't like the way you played it. Some of the CGI effects are kind of dodgy in this movie. It was 1995, so, like there's this opening, after the text scroll and it says screamers, and I love how a blade goes through the screamers and it floats apart like it's in space. That's a really cool touch. You go down to the surface of the planet and everything, and that's a lot of that's CGI'd, and that's really cool. But there's some other scenes, like there at the end, whenever his shuttle takes off to Earth, it looks like it's straight out of like maybe a PlayStation 3 video game. It's the 90s and CGI wasn't all that reliable. But I do like the claymation and stop motion used in this movie. There's a scene in NEB Command where the Type 1 reptile screamer gets up on a control panel and plugs in for a download. And something about that jerkiness of that style I really like. They do that in RoboCop a lot with like Ed 209. And it really lends itself to this movie. But back to the things that I don't really care for in this movie. There's a forced love story there between Hendrickson and Ruben's character of Jessica. And they don't really have much chemistry. As a matter of fact, I love Peter Weller, but he has to say this dialogue that just is really clunky in the scene where she's got her top off with her back to the camera and she's kind of washing down. And he's like, "God, you're beautiful." And it's just the way it's delivered and the timing it's delivered in is just off. And that pretty much goes for their entire relationship through this movie. And then the big bugaboo in this movie for me, like I said, after that big reveal of what the Type 2 was, and then him and Jessica, get to his pod and escape, that should have been the end of the movie. Maybe have one final swerve at the end of the movie, but no. This movie has like 3 final swerves. If in a wrestling equivalent of this, if Vince Russo, if you follow wrestling, would have written this script for this movie, this is something he would have done. Which of course killed WCW. We're back in spoiler territory here. As they're trying to get this pod to go off, you've got his buddy Chuck who comes back. Only it's not Chuck. He's a screamer, and of course he has to be disposed of. And then you not only have Jessica, who turns out to be a screamer, but there's another Jessica who goes and they have this robot fight just when you think everything's in the clear. And then it turns out only one of them can escape. So she's destroyed, and he gets in his pod, and he's going back to Earth. And somehow, even though he's in this bunker that only his handprint, could open the door to, there's this teddy bear, from the David in the cockpit of his pod. And how in the world did that get there? And of course, he throws his tab off his wrist, and of course the teddy bear, as it fades to black, starts moving. For one last final, we don't need that in this movie. It's the ending of this movie drags it down almost an entire ratings point for me. That could have been done so much better, so differently. And it just, I watched this and I'm like, no, no. Who wrote this? Who filmed this? Who directed this and thought this was a good idea? And who produced this and said, yeah, let's go with that. That's a good idea. And I've heard Peter Weller was kind of behind it, which is, he's kind of an odd guy, but it's like, dude, come on. But that is the biggest drawback to this movie is, kind of the shoehorned in love story that doesn't really fit. And then the swerves at the end of this thing. It's just, it's unacceptable. So under regular circumstances, a movie like this on Drew Reviews would get an 8, with the bad CGI and all. But that last act and a half of the movie brings it down quite a bit for me with the love interest and the swerves. It's not even quite a 7. It's a little better than 3 and a quarter. I'm going to go 6.9 for Screamers. This to me is a movie that could have been, and a lot of people apparently didn't like it because, like I said, $20 million budget. It made like almost 6 at the box office, so it was a major flop. People didn't really discover this until home video and DVD. I'd heard about it for years and actually saw a DVD at a buy and trade type place for DVDs and music, and I saw it there, and I'm like, I'm gonna get this. But this is a fun movie. I break it out once or twice a year and watch it, and it's a pleasure to get to watch Peter Weller act. Some of these other guys like Roy Dupuy, not so much. But would I recommend Screamers? Absolutely. Would I recommend it to somebody who doesn't like sci-fi? Well, I showed this to my wife, and she didn't hate it. It wasn't her favorite thing in the world to watch, but she got through it. And parts of it, like I said, she's like, "Oh, that was pretty dumb." But she did enjoy it a little bit. So if you're like me and you've got a wife or a husband that's like not into sci-fi, I would show it to them. It might be something they never want to watch again, but it's definitely worth a watch. So guys, I put up a poll a few weeks back, and I had like a three-way tie for first place. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do next. I think I'm probably going to do the original Planet of the Apes from 1968. I've got a Friday the 13th in there I'm going to have to do, and it's summertime. So Sleepaway Camp 2 got a lot of votes. I like Sleepaway Camp 2 a whole lot better than I like that first movie. So we're going to talk about those three coming up next. I don't know what order I'm going to release them in, but be looking forward to those. And as always, please like and subscribe if you like what you see here. I'm Andrew, and I'll see you down the line.